Welcome to another episode of NBM Talks, a series of the Narrative-Based Medicine Lab, where we speak with individuals who are working at the intersection of literature, medicine, and health. Our guests are writers, clinicians, scholars, artists, and advocates who are pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the field. Together we discuss how we can engage with narrative-based medicine principles and practices in creative and diverse ways. We hope you enjoy this episode. Our guest today is Jeff Thompson. Dr. Thompson retired in 2022 as a detective in the New York City Police Department, also having served as a hostage negotiator, public information officer, and the first ever mental health and wellness coordinator. Dr. Thompson received his doctorate from Griffith University Law School for research on the development of rapport, building trust, and displaying professionalism during conflict situations. His work has appeared in book chapters, journal articles, and on websites including psychologytoday.com, and his resiliency book, Warrior 21, has been implemented in first responder training in many agencies and universities. Jeff, we're excited to talk with you about your involvement in narrative-based medicine in all kinds of ways. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, and I'm incredibly proud and happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure, and I'm looking forward to this one especially, in part because most of our participants at the lab, as you know, are health practitioners of some kind, and you've had a different journey towards narrative-based medicine. Could you tell us a little bit, first of all, about your background?
Yeah, I guess it's a unique approach, and that's part of what my whole life experience is. I never wanted to take, the easy, flat path, and wanted to challenge myself while always professionally wanting to help and their fellow humans. So it hit me one day when I was much younger that one of the best jobs that I can do that is becoming an NYPD police officer. I'm based in New York City. And I started off my career the regular, typical police path. I walked the beat, drove around in a patrol car. Then I went into a variety of different specialized units where I would help people along with teammates that are in, high pressure situations where literally life and death could be at stake, from individual interactions to large scale protests that were violent or potentially violent. And I realized fairly quickly the skills used were primarily communication to help de-escalate and resolve situations as best as we can. That kind of then at the same time, I realized as much as there's an art to this, there was a science that I didn't quite have. So I was getting the life experiences of the art of applying this, but I knew in order to continually get better at it for myself as well as helping others, that led me down the academic path where I got my master's, I got my first PhD, and I'm also very happy and excited. I just completed my second PhD in narrative psychology at Edinburgh Napier University in Scotland. But going back to when I went down the academic path, they were kind of, that they like the cart or the horse. It's kind of they were racing each other side by side. Then for the remainder of my career, I became a hostage negotiator. I still continue to teach and train it and consult for agencies across the U.S., Canada, um, elsewhere. And then I guess where, as much as it seems, like, especially for the primary group of your audience, it really isn't that much different from the healthcare field in world because I would say we're in the business of helping people, often that are in a mental health crisis in one form or another. And I realized put the last quarter of my career, other people outside of the public that often were going through a mental health crisis in a variety of ways were the first responders and the police themselves. So I became the NYPD's first ever mental health and wellness coordinator, where I turned a lot of my work inward facing because, yet again, and incredibly unfortunate, there's a high suicide rate in policing, much like there is with physicians in the much wider healthcare field. So a lot of my work continues to be helping the helpers, the
Hmm.
people that help other people, trying to help them take care of themselves, but also applying research to make sure these interventions are both evidence-based and practical for people that say they're too busy.
Well, this is fascinating to begin with, and let me congratulate you as well. I didn't know that, in addition to the rest of your background, it's second PhD.
Oh, it just happened.
Additionally
There it
impressive. That's fantastic. So, in terms of moving towards narrative-based medicine, how did you
is.
learn about this field, and how did you how have you seen it to be helpful in what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm smiling as I say this. Thank you for the opportunity now to talk a little bit about my research and my recent PhD in narrative psychology. It's the idea of, and look, I haven't coined any of these terms. It's been great researchers and practitioners that have paved the way, both in specific narrative based medicine and also the wider field of what I call narrative psychology, or even just narrative health, which includes narrative therapy. It's the idea of that I make the case that stories are science. And what do I mean by that? Stories alone aren't science, but if they're analyzed and researched a proper way, mainly using qualitative methodologies, like for me, interpretative phenomenological analysis, or just more broadly phenomenology, but absolutely not limited to them. That idea that a story is science because our stories just don't tell about our lives, they create them. So the question becomes, and I just asked this rhetorically to you, Damien, or imagine if I did ask you, which I kind of am, hey, Damien, who's writing your life story? And I would hope you'd say, well, I am, Jeff. And I say, you're right. So that's not really the question. The real question then is, what story are you writing? What story are you telling yourself? And then what story are you telling others? And isn't that the crux of narrative medicine, but also just narrative, the science approach to narratives, but also the real world? That's what I did my whole career in policing.
Hmm.
That's what I did my whole career as a hostage negotiator. But how about it's not just limited to that? Any career and profession where you interact with people, but especially in those high risk, high pressure environments, it's twofold. And this is where my resilience work and also my work in awe blends into all this, because in order to effectively continually help other people, you also need to take care of yourself. And that's not selfish, it's smart, because everyone deserves a positive mental health. But again, my work and others show practicing this approach to narratives helps you be better at your own mental health, but it also neatly or sometimes mentally corresponds with the skills, our professional skills that make us good at what we do for a living.
I want to ask you about, I think, everything that you've just said. I'd like to ask you like 20 questions about all this. I have to admit, I took a deep breath when you asked me who's writing the story that I'm living, because I do sometimes wonder
I was waiting for you to
who's
answer,
holding the pen.
Damien.
And what unfortunate, sad narrator is is behind the scenes there. But in any case, first question, lots
Yeah.
of them. But you're talking about narrative. You're talking about stories. It sounds to me, I think, that you're speaking more about people's stories, about experience and the kind of the self narration that we do. But is there a connection to more literary stories? Are you talking about written stories and more composed narrations as well, or how do they relate?
Well, yeah. So I guess a lot of my research work interventions are allowing people time, even when they feel like they don't have time, to develop their own life story, both with the work they do, but also more broadly. I help them develop it often again in the context of the term awe and how that ties into professional skills and resilience. But then how do they develop it? But then also how do they share it with others? And how are they exposed to those types of stories? Then if you look at it all there from the lens of narrative-based medicine too, is how do we embrace the literary world, whether it's a poem, short story, full long story, cinema, or an image or video, and how do we learn from that to again that twofold better ourselves and our own well-being as well as what we do professionally. And you look at I've been applying it, like for example, I do a advanced hostage negotiator course that grounded in narrative-based medicine practices where we use the literature such as I often use like short video clips, but also reflective lighting. Where think about it, if you're a hostage negotiator or police and you're going to be watching a short video clip or looking at a drawing or a painting, that alone promotes open-mindedness, because the opposite of that could be closed-minded, arrogant, shut off. That doesn't make you a good hostage negotiator. That actually makes you a really bad one. So just being open to the skills and practices, and this is where Damien, I know with the work that you do at Toronto, this stuff sells itself. And I accord the science and data behind it, but I tell people all the time, give it a try, experience it yourself, and I'm pretty certain you're gonna find value in it. You didn't ask me to say this, but I also always like to add, how did I hone my skills in doing this by attending the online certificate that you co-taught with Karen. And it took from what I thought I was probably ideally doing pretty good to up my game, but also first and foremost in a non-selfish way. It was just an absolute joy and pleasure to advance it just for my own well-being. And it was an absolute joy. And I know you didn't ask this. This isn't an advertisement, but I recommend it to anybody out there wanting to just get better for themselves and what they do professionally. And here's the thing too. Sorry, now throw it back to you. It's not just when you're surrounded with like-minded people. This also, I think, in a subtle way, practicing narrative-based medicine with a group or even a small group, it reminds you you're not alone. And there's other like-minded people in your profession, be it hostage negotiators as one example, or stuff that I've done with NASA and space research or in the healthcare field. As strong as we are and as resilient as we are, our life stories don't include solo journeys. There's other people involved. So let's make sure those other people involved see the world the same way we do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, it's very kind of you, Jeff. Thanks very much for for your endorsement, and we've learned a ton from you as well as we learn from all our participants. And I think you're absolutely right that a lot of what we do is providing a space where stories can be told and listened to, and different sides of them seen as you've discussed, but also shared. And so much of it is about creating that community and supportive discussion where people can share and understand, look again, and feel differently and go further. That actually connects to what I was going to ask you about next, because you mentioned self-compassion, you mentioned resilience for people working
Mm-hmm.
in healthcare and in hostage negotiation and other fields. I know that you've developed and you have a concept of the upward spiral in narrative-based
Right.
medicine and psychology more broadly. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that and how that's I think, to me, a novelty and an original step in for narrative-based medicine.
Well, right. So thank you, David. So here's the way I look at it. First, starting with this concept of resilience, and it's sometimes the term overused. We all have our different definitions of resilience. My current working definition of resilience is, well, first of all, think about the common one. And for your listener, if I ask them how would you define resilience? Quite often we hear that term bouncing back, right? Bouncing back from tough, adverse moments in life. That's absolutely resilient. But imagine if it was only that was the only definition of resilience. I have a big, big problem with that because, and hopefully, well, either you or your listeners or a combination, like, wait, hold on, what do you mean? What I mean is, if resilience was only bouncing back from the tough and bad moments in life, what are we only preparing for or envisioning? The tough and the bad. That's not good. That's not a healthy way to see the world. So I say that it's also realistic to have challenging moments. So I say, yes, but hold on. So dot, dot, dot. That's one third of the definition of resilience. So one is what I just said, making time to acknowledge, prepare, bounce back. How about number two? As strong and resilient as every one of us are, we also realize in these stories and narratives that we develop, we don't need to take on life challenges by ourselves. So part two of resilience is asking for help when we need it, but also not just at our worst moments throughout our life. That's part two. Then part three is if it sort of creates the balance to part one. If part one is acknowledging the tough and the bad, part two is exactly what you just brought up. We also need to make time for what? The good. So a lot of my work is involved in what I call these upward spirals. How do we make sure we make time for the heavy nit in life, but then also how do we try and find good and pull good out of things going on? Not even necessarily to the tough moment, maybe trying to look beyond that. Because think about it, when people are going through a hard time, sometimes their focus becomes really constricted. I try and widen that. And that's where what I call real resilience, comes into play. And taking a turn from narrative therapy, also, I'm very blessed to come into people's lives to also, and I'm not a clinician, let me be very clear. This is not to replace clinical therapy or things like that. It's more like a peer type work of coaching. I get to be a co author for a couple pages or maybe a chapter or two of somebody's life to help them start rewriting their life story. And it's not ignoring the bad, it's also making time for the good. And here's the thing, when people do this, I don't get credit for any of this because they're the author. They're the ones writing it. I say the best title I can have And especially in this world of narrative-based medicine, I'm a guide, no more, no less. People are the authors of their own life story. They have to make the decisions themselves. I'm just here. Often I say, whether in the worst moment of their life, and with the suicide prevention type work I do, or just in the everyday moment, as a guide, I'm trying to shine a light to show there's more than one pathway. But it's ultimately for them to decide which path to take.
I think what I find so salient about this is almost unconsciously, maybe, there's a little bit of a bias in our work here at the lab, or maybe in narrative-based medicine more generally, or in the health humanities more generally. It's like a sort of a bias towards trauma, a bias towards suffering, a bias towards the negative, naturally, because of the kind of stories people are experiencing and things that they're going through, and the intense and often incredibly painful and difficult to process experiences of health practitioners. But I find it incredibly valuable to start to flip it and to start to think about growth and the positive and the optimism that can come out of this.
Exactly.
And you're someone who works obviously at the front line, as much as anybody else, and yet you're able to find a different path. I think a different sort of scholarly and research and conceptual path. The question is, how have you found people respond to it? Is there resistance? Is there hesitation? Is there buy-in, agreement? What do people tend to say to you?
Honestly, like Danny, I would say, and I don't want anybody asking me for the data on this. This is just me anecdotally saying 99% of the people love it. And whether it's 1 or 2% don't buy into it, I'd say, well, I'm not selling anything, first of all. I'm just giving a life perspective that I learned and I've been working on my entire life. I also look at, who the hell am I to say they have to buy into it with a couple-day workshop or only a couple hours? The one thing is, I look at it, I plant the seed, and maybe it'll cultivate in somebody later on down the line. Now, looking at the other end of that, roughly 98, 90% of the people enjoy it. I think truly it's because of how practical, and you know that too, these interventions are. And here, where it comes again with with our audience and the audiences that I continue to work with. The world is really, really awful to a certain degree, and we experience death and all these other things. I'm not here to say ignore that. It's not pie in the sky, rainbows, butterflies, and unicorns. I'm saying we acknowledge that, but also, like, for a term, how do we pull? And here's the really important term: how do we pull meaning and purpose in life from those experiences? And people say, "Well, why do I need to do that?" I go, "What the hell is the alternative? Everything's doom and gloom." And that's going to destroy you no matter how strong you think you are. That's where the burnout, that's where the cynicism comes in. And it destroys us with moral injury and things like that. So I say, how? Yes. Or like, here's the example with it say with the hostage negotiation work. It's really crisis negotiation because very rarely are there actual hostage incidents. But if we were helping somebody that are threatening to take their own life, and say it does turn out the wrong way, and that does happen, how do we pull meaning out of that? First, we acknowledge it's awful. It's not the result we want. But how do we also pull meaning out of that? Think, well, I hope that person in this last moment of their life realized somebody truly cared, and that was me. And I don't know when was the last time or if they ever had it, but I'd like to think they really realized that I truly did care. So that's directly related to our work. But then I just want to throw one more thing in there. I'd like to think I speak for all of our listeners, if not many of them. We're really blessed to do what we do for a living. In one way or another, we're servants to other human beings and helping them in one way or another, often when they're struggling. So it's more than just that quote unquote a job. It's a calling, it's a passion. But this is where we got to make sure that doesn't overwhelm us. Our meaning and purpose solely can't be our work. That's not healthy. We've got to make sure we have boundaries. And we also have to have meaning and purpose beyond our work role. And that's why I do a lot of my workshops too, is I help cultivate that as well. And I say, as great as your title is, whether, it's doctor, whether it's nurse or detective or hostage negotiator, where's that on your pecking order of great titles that you have? And how do you make sure maybe you need some recalibration? So it's finding that joy and that beauty. And I'll just say, as a non-plug, that's where, like, some of the cool work that I did with NASA, as well as some of my research with hostage negotiating, to pull that out. And it's pretty amazing. And again, I'm blessed to be able to do this stuff.
It's pretty inspiring, Jeff, and pretty deep, and I appreciate especially. I think really put your finger on something in the way you talk about the different themes in these stories and different facets of them. It's not a kind of toxic positivity of everything's fine, but it's an appreciation of what's difficult, together with not being swallowed up by it. So you mentioned NASA. You've mentioned working with police and other emergency responders. You talked a little bit about awe. What more formally, what are your current projects, and what's exciting you about narrative-based medicine these days?
Well, as I smile again, everything's exciting me. That's the way I try and approach life, to give myself and to practice what I preach here. At first, I'm blessed to again just have finished my second PhD at Edinburgh Napier University and working with such brilliant people there. If I can talk a moment about awe, and I'm glad you said it first because I know sometimes people say I have a strong New York accent. So what Damien and I both said was awe. Thank you for laughing. I hope a few listeners are too.
I-
AWE, awe.
When I say it, people think I'm talking about something you use to steer a boat.
Oh, I'm right.
It's
I
an
think
awe.
you told me that in a previous time.
So yeah,
But people
AWE.
yeah. Sometimes people think I'm saying like AHHH, like when you see a cute baby, like, oh, yeah, those babies are
Aw.
cute, but that's not what I'm researching. Let
So
somebody else do that.
so what are you talking about?
Yeah. So, all right. What am I talking about? Awe. And why is awe so important? Again, it's relation. My research and others have shown awe, first of all, can help create those upward spirals in life. I use awe as, again, I love our metaphors in narrative based medicine. We use tapestry a lot. Awe is that first golden thread that I use to create a beautiful, complex tapestry, and it ties into all narratives. So going back to the beginning, that stories are signs. First, my definition of awe. Awe is and I look at positive awe. Awe is a positive, complex emotion we experience in the presence of someone or something complex and challenges our current thinking. Now, as much as an awe moment can be a what we would call an ordinary response to something extraordinary. So think about the birth of a child, that great once in a lifetime vacation or trip somewhere. That's an ordinary response to something ordinary. I also will try and pull out those ordinary moments of awe. So what do I mean? Awe can also be an extraordinary response to something ordinary. And here's the thing, it doesn't have to be necessarily off for you, but when I do my intervention, I can't help but think about our healthcare workers. Imagine a nurse in the ER and she's working her butt off all day. What I talk about always take a brief moment to even when was the last time you stopped to think about everything that you're doing and how far you work and how hard you work to get to where you are. And just in that shift alone, how many people you impacted, all the while drinking that cold cup of coffee that I know many of us have done because you're running back and forth. And I hope that put a smile on some people's faces. This is where the science and stories come in because I argue or claim, like, my biggest claim, or is a gateway to nearly, if not every other resilience practice. What I just shared and that little snippet of this made up nurse story that is probably accurate for many of our listeners, it talks about there's your self efficacy, your self compassion, your social connectedness, your empathy, realizing your accomplishment. There's so many gratitude, humility. Also, one that I know we'll never have time to talk to in this episode: the curiosity and open mindedness. It's just all is that beautiful gateway to so much more. Where as much as it's the golden thread to start the tapestry, once you start that tapestry and start reflecting on these awe narratives, who cares about awe anymore, really? Because it really leads into all those other positive emotions that might work. And again, others as well. It shows it really enhances our professional skills as well. So that's where I do when people bring me in or potentially bring me in to do my workshops. They're like, well, how's this work related? I'm saying, well, here, look at what the studies have shown. And it's a beautiful opportunity. So I guess the one quick thing I will also say is I do these all these different types of projects. One called the Awe Project. This isn't a sales pitch, it's free. It'll always be free. All you literally do is watch a video in the morning and evening in a private Google Classroom with a cohort from across the US, Canada, elsewhere, all over the world, people are participated. It takes 5 minutes in the morning and evening. You fit it in whenever you can. I published a couple of research studies on it. The number one reason people, Damien, say they enjoy doing it, and it's these people that are too busy, keep in mind, they say that they love guaranteeing themselves a break twice a day for 5 days. And again, it's just I've always been the fortunate person to be part of all these studies as well as the research. And it's just amazing reading these stories and then sharing them with other people that have been published in research journals and other places as well. It's pretty amazing.
And for you personally, what's your example of what creates awe in you, or provokes that reaction, or where was the last place you were that you felt that?
Well, I'll give you two. I guess, thanks for putting me on the spot. You didn't tell me you were gonna ask me this. Thanks, David. By the way, as I smile again, it's that experiencing awe and reflecting on awe helps you handle ambiguity and uncertainty, which you just can't get a chance there, Daniel. I guess the extraordinary moments of awe. I love traveling. I love swimming in the ocean, and there's something really profound for me. It's one of the only times I could get my mind to stop racing when I'm in the ocean about 8 inches past where my feet can't touch the ground anymore, and
Mm.
floating and looking around the waves, the sky, the beach, people or not are seeing fish swim by. So that's the extraordinary. The ordinary is just honestly, it's a daily cup of coffee. Let's just say that first thing in the morning. And I always say in my head, first sip. And no matter what the world is throwing at me, I've taken care of myself to start the day. So the ordinary and extraordinary. Hopefully that resonates.
It does. It's beautiful. Thank you very much. We're going to have to wrap it up shortly, Jeff. But if people want to know more about your project or about your research, your books, your articles, where's the best place for them to start?
I guess a great starting point would go to 5daysofawe.com. That talks about my all work and my all research. It also, if you click research, it lists all my studies. And also I try to create a resource for everyone's research on the concept of awe. So there's dozens and dozens of them on there. I'm on LinkedIn if people want to stay in touch or have further questions for me. I've written some articles at Psychology Today as well. You can find me if you want to find me out there. I'm accessible. I tell people I respond all the time. Sometimes it takes a few days, but that's also important. If somebody's going to put the effort into reaching out to me, I want to make sure that they know that I'm reading it and I'll reply, because if there's one thing I learned is we're all in it together and we need to take care of each other. And it's sometimes a simple email. It's not that big of a deal. It's trying to do the important things in life.
Amen to that. Jeff, thank you very much. As ever, it's been inspiring and educational and a ton of fun chatting with you. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, check out many other episodes. And if you're interested in learning more about narrative-based medicine, visit us online at narrativebasedmedicine.ca for more great content and to explore our upcoming offerings.